Well, good morning and welcome to Oxford Bible Fellowship Online. So glad you guys can join us. So now's the time to grab that cup of coffee, grab your family, gather around. It's so good to have you guys join us online. And like we kind of said last week, take a picture of where you're at. Send us a picture or comment below just to let us know that who you're watching with and where you're at. Also, make sure to on the bottom here, there's a connection form. So just below the video here, there's a connection form. Make sure you fill that out. That way we get to know, again, that you're watching, and any prayer requests you have or anything that that you need help with, let us know. We'd love to be able to come alongside of you in any way. Also, right below is the giving tab. So I think there's a button that says donate, give. Go ahead and you can give online, and if you haven't done that already, you can register to do that, and you can just give right there on the website. And then also to my left, your right, is the worship guide. And so you can follow along with the songs that we're singing this morning, and also there's the sermon, a chance for you to take notes and be able to follow along during the sermon. Also for Easter, we're doing a sunrise service at 7 a.m., so you want to get up nice and early for that. And also we're having a 9 o'clock service and 10:30 service on Easter morning. And so, hope you guys enjoy this service. We're excited to be able to do this. Thankful for the opportunity to be able to have technology that we can still gather, even if it's remotely and online. So, Corey and Hannah's going to lead us in some worship.
Yep. So we'll sing in just a minute, but yesterday I was at the grocery store, and you might have experienced this where you're in Kroger, Walmart, wherever, and there's just entire shelves that are just barren. There's nothing there. Like, the obvious one is toilet paper, right? There's also like hand sanitizer, bottled water, pasta. Like, I don't know what people are thinking, why they need pasta. It's kind of funny, but it made me think, like, what's going on? What does this reveal about humans, about our culture, about what we're trusting in? And I think ultimately it reveals our need for control. And so it's like, well, I can't go to work, I can't go to school, I can't go out to eat, I can't hang out with my friends, but I can buy toilet paper. And I'm going to buy a lot of it. Or I can buy pasta, enough for 2 years worth. Right? It's sort of silly, but I think it's an indicator of where we put our trust. Psalm 84, 4-5, it's up here on the screen next to me. The writer says, "Blessed are those who dwell in your house." And you're like, okay, actually, right now my house is the problem. I'm trying to get out of my house. But he says, "Blessed are those who dwell in your house, ever singing your praise. Blessed are those whose strength is in you." And that word blessed means happy. So he's saying happy are those who are just dwelling, who are trusting in God, and happy are those whose strength is in you. Not in how much toilet paper we have, not in how much pasta or whatever other stuff we have, but it's also our strength, our confidence is not in our immune system. It's not in our job status, whether we're employed or whether we've lost our job because of this epidemic, this pandemic, but it's also not, our strength's not in our bank account. It's not in the health of our small business or the health of our kids, of our family, those that we love. So I just want to take a moment before we start singing a song that we know, just to, 1 Peter calls us to cast our cares onto him, onto Jesus, because he cares for us. So maybe your the worry is that you're unemployed or that your immune system's compromised. So whatever that is, I encourage you right now to just say, "Jesus, I give that to you. Jesus, I give to you the health of that loved one in my life. I can't control it, but it's weighing on me. Jesus, I give to you the lack of food in my pantry," or whatever it is. Jesus, I give it to you right now. So just take a moment to do that. And we'll sing together. The song we know, we're going to put a fun little twist on it, but sing along with us.
Your voice thundered when the world was born. Life begins and ends in the dust you form. Faith commanded impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done.
So we're doing a song, it's called We Praise You. It might be new to a lot of you, but when I first heard it, I thought, OBF, we have to do this song. In light of what's going on in our world, there's so much uncertainty, there's so much fear, and there's so much confusion as well. You could probably put in a couple other emotions. But let me just read a couple lines from the song. One of the verses, at the very beginning, it says, "Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety." And then the chorus, there's this one line that I really love. It says, "Fear cannot survive when we praise you. Fear cannot survive when we praise you." And so this song, it calls us to lift our eyes off of our circumstances, off of what's happening in our world, in our own hearts, and to look to the God who is constant. And so as we sing, let these words, let these truths actually be a weapon to say, you know what, fear, I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to listen to the anxiety. I'm not going to listen to the enemy who would seek to kill, steal, and destroy the joy that I have in Christ. So let's sing this together with confidence, with victory. It's fun. And so we're excited to celebrate who our God is.
Silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. We sing with all we are and we claim your victory. Let it rise. We'll see you break down every wall.
what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you. We break down every wall. We'll launch the giant soul. For fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lifted high. All creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you.
God, we praise you that you are the God who conquers fear, who conquers doubt, anxiety. You still the voices in our head that are not truth. And we praise you for who you are. Church, as you're watching with your family, take a moment now to just pray for each other, to pray that God would help you to hear his voice as we open his word together. So just do that for a couple minutes, and then we will get into God's word together.
Thank you, Corey and Hannah, for leading us in some singing, and I hope at home you're able to engage with the songs that we're singing together here. And so whether you're at home or whether you're on the road, wherever it may be, that you would be able to take this moment of just being able to engage with what's going on in your personal life. You may be at home, your children may be running around, you may be by yourself, your dog may be barking in the background. There's noise in our background here, there's lots going on. But we're going to take this moment just to listen to God through his word. And so grab a Bible. We're in Ecclesiastes. We're continuing our study called Bigger Than You from the book of Ecclesiastes. And today we're in chapter 3, looking at verses 1 to 15. One of the things that I find extraordinarily annoying is doing puzzles. I hate puzzles. I don't have the patience for puzzles. Maybe you do. But what happens inevitably when I do a puzzle is I start out, and it's great, right? I've got little pieces of the puzzle all together, and I got the box there, and then it's going along, and all of a sudden, I'm missing the one piece to complete the puzzle, right? And so all this work, all this effort to go in to complete the puzzle, and I can't do it. The other thing that's most annoying about doing puzzles is trying to do a puzzle and you actually don't have the cover, right? Hopefully you've got the box and you've saved the box, but if you haven't, usually, at least in our home, sometimes you put the puzzle pieces in a little Ziploc bag and you try to pull it out later and try to do the puzzle without the box cover itself. Very difficult, very annoying. Maybe you're a child at home and you do Legos, right? And you have a Lego set that you like to do, you put together, and you work and you work and you work, and then at the very end, you need that one piece to complete it, and it's missing, right? And you're like so frustrated. These are the things that annoy me. Maybe they annoy you as well. Here's why I think it's also annoying, because sometimes life can feel like that. Yeah, we're doing puzzles and maybe we're putting together a Lego set, or you're building something else, but sometimes life can feel like that. Like we're missing something. We're missing a part of the picture, or we're missing a piece. We've got all these pieces laid out in front of us, and we've got the corner piece, we got this piece here, and when it gets to the end, and we're trying to build something, and we don't know exactly how it all fits together, and we come to a point in our life, we realize, I'm missing a key piece of the puzzle. And it's frustrating, isn't it? It's sometimes how life can feel for us. We have a limited understanding of the big picture, and we have a limited understanding of how life actually fits and how it actually works together. I think in times of crisis, like we're going through in our world right now, it's not just a localized thing, it is a global thing that we are going through, that we can experience that reality that we don't actually understand how life works or how life fits together, like we're missing a piece of the puzzle. And it's during these times where our inability to understand things gets magnified, where it puts a big spotlight and it says that we don't have an understanding. And so sometimes when we grow up, as we grow up, it also means we grow small. We grow small in our understanding, we grow small in our ability to grasp the big things of life. When we come to the book of Ecclesiastes, it's very helpful for us, actually. And if you've been journeying with us, the Ecclesiastes has been super helpful for us to understand, how do we live a life that's bigger than myself? How do I actually live life with that reality that I don't have the big picture, I don't understand how life fits together, and yet still live with having faith in God? And Ecclesiastes helps us with this. So far in our study, we've seen a couple different important things. Going back to chapter 1, we saw that it's important for us to accept our limitations. Life is short, life is elusive, life is repetitive. And so the sooner we can accept our limitations, the sooner we can actually start living. Last week when we were together, we were looking at this important chapter, chapter 1 all the way through chapter 2, and we talked about chasing God over chasing happiness. And that's an important transition for us because we want to be happy people, but if we are chasing happiness, what we said last week, it actually ends in emptiness. But if we can learn to chase God and run hard after Him and run hard after Him with other people and community, then actually we end up happy people. And so today, when we are in chapter 3, the preacher, who's the writer of Ecclesiastes, has a perspective on time and on seasons of life that we go through that are going to help us understand how do we take advantage of adversity, how do we take advantage of difficult things that we go through. So here's the big idea I want you to walk away from this morning. You can write this down, or you can put it in your phone, however you are going to remember this. But it is this, that times of change are times of challenge. And it's a simple point, right? It's a simple point for us to grasp, that when things change, it challenges us. Now, some of us find comfort within change. It's a comforting thing for us. We're like, oh, good, I don't want things to stay the same. I want to change. I want to graduate from school. I want to get that new job. I want to move on. Because there's comfort sometimes when things are changing. But more often, when things change, it challenges us at our very core. And so when we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, I'm going to read for us verses 1 all the way down to verse 15. I think that this is going to help us understand how do we navigate through times of change and how do we take advantage of it. So let me read for us, starting in verse 1 of chapter 3. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. That's kind of important right now. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. For what gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he's put eternity into man's heart, so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all of his toil. This is God gifts to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, and that which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes kind of breaking this down, and then we'll take some time to apply it to our lives. If you look at the first 8 verses there of chapter 3, it is this very kind of rhythmic poem, isn't it? It's this poetry of kind of these couplets. And if you would count them out, what you would see is there's 14 different couplets. And what's described here is almost these polar opposite experiences, right? So if you see in the beginning, it's time to be born, and time to die, and all the way down to the end in verse 8, a time for war and a time for peace. And throughout all those, it's this kind of this warp and woof of life. We've got these polar opposite experiences that we're going through in life. And so in verse 1, he says, there's a time for all of these things. There's a time for all of these different periods and seasons of life to occur for us. They all fit in. But what we can see here is that we look at this rhythmic poem, and what we understand is that this is really the totality of life's experiences, isn't it? And if we look at him as we were just described them, there is no order and there is no rhythm. It's just kind of this chaotic cadence of life. That as he goes through it, it's just a poem, but he's not describing when one happens and when another one happens. He's just simply saying life is kind of this chaotic mess. This complex mixture of good, bad, hard, in-between times. And the basic pattern is just that. There's going to be good times and there's going to be bad times. You know, there's a time to kill and a time to heal, good and bad. There's a time to hate, he says. A time to love, a time for war and time for peace. So there's some of this basic pattern of good versus bad times, but some of them are not so straightforward. Some of them are, not good or bad. They're just done at the right time. So there's a time to keep silent and there's a time to speak. There's not good or bad. It's just that there's a right time to do those things. You heard me laughing while I was reading the scripture. There's a time to refrain from embracing and a time to embrace. So, physical distancing. I guess there's a time for this for us right now to not be giving high fives and not hugging unless you're married or whatever. But at the same time, it's not as straightforward. And some of them are just completely ambiguous, right? There's a time to search and a time to give up. And so in all of these totalities of life's experiences, as we go through the poem and as we see this, how we can just read it and the warp and the woof of life, what he's simply saying is that life is complex. And the one season can change to the next season on a dime. For no reason. One day you might be hating, the next day you might be loving. One day we're born, the next day we die. And the change from one season to the next season requires wisdom. And that's why the main point I'm wanting to drive home is that these times have changed. When we go through these times, because this poem is our experience of life. And we have no control over when we're in one period and when we're over the next. It's just that this is our experience of life. It's complex, it's confusing. We don't have that missing piece of how does one part of life fit into the next part? Why are we in one season today and tomorrow we're in the next season? And we have no control over any of this. And so what this requires is it requires wisdom. And the book of Ecclesiastes is part of wisdom literature. It's what he's teaching us of how do we live a life that's bigger than ourselves? How do we live wisely, knowing that we are in this complex mixture of life? I think especially where our world is at right now, and maybe many of you are experiencing right now, of anxiety and fear and adversity, things that we're all going through right now, whether it's personally in your home, whether your family life is just kind of falling apart, your job is on the rocks, you don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks from now, a month from now. Culturally, we don't know what's around the corner. Globally, there's adversity that's all around us. And so what I want us to focus on for a few minutes this morning is how, knowing that this is the reality, that our dynamic here in this poem, how then do we take advantage of adversity? And I think there's at least kind of 4 ways that we can look at here and say this is clearly something that God is allowing in our world right now. Clearly, everyone in the world is experiencing some level of adversity. And then how does this poem and how do these verses help us to take advantage of that adversity? So as things change and they challenge us, we can also find comfort in it. First one is this, verses 1 to 8. You and I can accept adversity not as an interruption, but as an instructor. We can accept adversity, the difficult things that we experience in life, this change of seasons, the time for one thing and a time for next. We can accept adversity in the midst of all those things, not as an interruption, but as an instructor. And this is so important because if I look at my life and I look at the people around me, what I want more than anything is ease and comfort. And when something disrupts that, I think it's an interruption. I think, no, don't interrupt my schedule. Don't interrupt my church life. Don't interrupt my family life. Don't do that, because I like to have control over this thing. So my normal response, and probably yours as well, is that when we face adversity, we say, go away. No, thank you. I don't want to go through difficult times. And this is not just related to COVID-19. It's just related to adversity just in life in general. When we go through adversity, we'd say, I would rather not have that interruption. And as we go through this, what we have to understand is it is not an interruption, it is actually an instructor, because sometimes God allows adversity to instruct us on certain things, and this can be very painful for us. Here's a great quote from C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis says this: pain, which is often associated with adversity, pain insists on being attended to. God will whisper to us in our pleasures. He speaks to our consciences. But listen to this. He shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse the deaf world. Now, this probably comes from C.S. Lewis's book, The Problem of Pain, which is a very painful book to read for me. I tried to read it a couple years ago, and it was very difficult. But I love this quote for a couple different reasons. I love it because it's truthful. What I don't like is the truth about it. Because if it's true that pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world, I would think that what we are going through, and now as our culture, but also individually, it can be a very painful experience for some people. Losing a job, not sure about the future, anxiety, fear, different realities that we're facing. We can say, go away, I don't want this in my life. But if C.S. Lewis is right, then this experience that we're going through, this painful experience, is his megaphone to rouse us. Because perhaps we're not listening to God. Perhaps in this moment he's calling us to listen to him, to lean in, and to be in that posture of listening. And because we have no control over these different seasons of life, we don't know, we can think, well, that pain just interrupts me. But actually, in this moment, I think we're experiencing, it actually instructs us on a couple different things. Adversity teaches us a lot of different things. There's three things I want to highlight this morning. First is this. As we have already said, you and I have limited control of the seasons. This is one thing that adversity teaches us. It teaches us to let go. I love what Corey was saying earlier, just about, we have no control over what's on the shelf or what's not on the shelf. Why do we have certain things available to us right now? We have no control over these things. We have no control over what the government decides to do, what our governor decides to do. We have so little control, and adversity teaches us to accept that reality. That we have no control, and that these transitions from different seasons happen without our initiation. The second thing it teaches us, we can look at the poem, this is natural application for us, is that change and transition is inevitable in life. If you think things are always going to stay the same, you better be ready for things to change. Because nothing stays the same. And we know that, but we would really like everything to stay the same, wouldn't we? We would like for everything just to stay exactly how it is. I would love to be in this season of this poem here on all the positive things. I would love to be in a time where it's always healing, where it's always building up, where there's always laughter, where there's always dancing, there's always embracing. But the reality is, things change. And the sooner that you and I can embrace the fact of change before it occurs, the more nimble and agile we will be when the change actually occurs. But so many of us are not prepared for it. So many of us think, well, nothing's ever going to change in my life. This is always how it's going to be. Third is this: because of this reality that God is sovereign in all of these different changes that we experience in life, you and I can live without fear. When we are in Christ, you and I can experience the different seasons that we go through, knowing that in Christ there is no fear of death. death. There is no fear of what's around the corner, that we cannot know what's going around. But you and I can live without fear. One of the biggest things we can experience is to say, you know what? There are interruptions in my life are instructions. Second is this. Look at the first part of the poem again. We're saying focus on verses 1 to 8 is this. You and I should spend time reflecting in adversity, not rushing through it. Reflecting in adversity, not rushing through it. When we go through times of change and adversity, it tests us at our very core. So it challenges us, but it tests us. And here's, I think, we're going to see an experience that would kind of supersede our personal experience, but also anything we would experience in life, is we would go back and we look at the Israelites' experience and their wilderness experience. We could simply say this, that God breaks that which he intends to bless. We look at their experience, of the Israelites' experience of their disobedience. They were supposed to go in and take the land, right? They were going into the promised land, and they disobeyed. They didn't trust that God was going to give it to them. And so what he did is he broke them. And he led them into the wilderness for 40 years, wandering around with no real direction. He broke them. But he did it in order to bless them. And the blessing of their breaking was that they would learn to trust God, that they would learn to walk in obedience, that they would learn that they needed to know who God was and who they were, and that there was nothing special about them, but that God was extraordinarily loving and kind and gracious to them. I can only imagine wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. Because that's an experience that they went through. And sometimes we say this. Sometimes we say that experience is a great teacher. But you know what? I don't know if that's entirely true. It is at one level. But I think it's that reflective experience is a great teacher. So you and I maybe go through this wilderness experience as a culture and as maybe individual. You may be feeling like, man, I'm just going through this wilderness. This feels barren. What does the future hold? When is this going to change? When do I get back to my normal life? And it feels like we're just wandering around in the desert. And it is an experience, right? Everyone's going through this. And what I want to say is for us to say, let us not rush through it. Let's reflect on it. God gives us experiences in life, and let's not waste them. Let's not rush through it. If you and I can learn to pause, that's when the growth catches up with us. So here's how we can reflect on this. If you put up this verse here for us, we look at James 1, 2-4. James says this, and our men are studying James, and maybe it's almost wrapped up, but this is James 1, 2-4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. This is a wonderful verse, but it's also very challenging, because he's calling us to say, count it a joy, my brothers. Be joyful when you have these kinds of experiences. When you're going through trials, when you're going through adversity, when I'm feeling like I don't know what the future holds, I'm fearful, all kinds of experience. There's trials in these things. Why? Reflect on it. Because these experiences test your faith, the genuineness of your faith. And we could go even farther. When we do that, we say we're going to test the genuineness of my faith. When it goes through and I test that, what is produced on the other side of it is steadfastness, this surety that there is a steadfast steadiness. And then it goes on. Steadfastness has its full effect inside of us to bring us to maturity, lacking in nothing, that may be perfect and complete. But so many of us are up here in the trials of various kinds, and we stop and we say, I'm going through this trial. I'm going through this experience. And then we don't let it test the genuineness of our faith. That is one of the biggest things I think that we can do right now, is to say to God, God, how is this thing that we are experiencing as a culture, but also individually, how is it testing the genuineness of my faith? Don't let this experience that you're going through, that I'm going through, be a wasted experience just because I'm not reflecting on it. These different seasons of change cause us to say, what is this teaching me? What is God producing in me? So there's a couple different questions for reflection that we could say. There's different ways you can do this, but I would encourage you to do this. First of all, you need to create a unique space where you can reflect. It's easy to say that main point. Let's reflect, but say, I need to create a space. So sometimes in my home, my kids laugh at me sometimes, and because I have a chair that I sometimes sit in, and it's my thinking chair. And I just think. And I ponder, and I'm looking out into the deep woods, or whatever, I don't know. But it's one of those things where it says you need to create a unique space where you say, that is where I'm going to go and sit and reflect and think. Second is this, schedule it, right? Because it's nice to have that chair, it's nice to have that space, but if I'm not going to schedule that time into my life, it probably won't happen. And so if that means you got to get up early, it means you got to stay up late, it means you got to close the door behind you, there's no distractions, it means you got to go for a walk in Houston Woods, wherever you go, to say, I need to have this space in my life. And then I want you to ask some important questions for yourself. There's multiple different questions you could ask, but I'm going to give you three. The first is this: where do I need to grow? Where do I need to grow? This experience, whatever it is, this is for any point of adversity in your life. Where do I need to grow in this? Second is this: how is God showing up in my life? Are there unique things that I'm experiencing because of adversity that now I'm seeing God work in ways that I've never seen him actually work before in my life? Now I'm seeing him do certain things, answering certain prayers, or am I waiting for him to answer certain things? The third question is this: what do I need to trust God with? That's a point of reflection. Because sometimes there's emotions we need to trust God with, sometimes it's financial things, sometimes it's material things, sometimes it's all kinds of things. We say, God, I need to trust you with this. And if we don't pause and take that time to reflect on those things, it will be a wasted experience. Friends, don't waste adversity by rushing through it. Third is this. Okay, so we've gone through kind of that first poem, and it's just kind of this wharf and woof. And as we look at this poem, it would be easy for us to kind of extract it, what comes next. Because probably what you have seen, and I've seen the same thing too, is sometimes at funerals, we hear Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8 being read. And they're not always Christian funerals, because this is a nice poem, right? But if we don't take it to the next level down below it, this could mean this is just a godless existence. Where it's just, well, we can experience these things and it's without God. But that's not where the preacher leads us to. Next, he leads us to saying some very important things about adversity. Verses 9 to 11. In adversity, we can believe that God will bring beauty out of adversity. He will bring beauty out of it. So look at the verse with me. If you look down at verse 11, he says this. He says, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Again, a reference to time. So all the different times, all the different changes. And he says there, God will bring beauty out of all the different experiences in life. All the different complexities, all the different things that we go through in life. He's saying he will one day make it beautiful. That's why we can't just extract the poem out by itself and not go to the next point down here, because we can experience all those things, all those different changes, those transitions, and say, well, God is a part of this. But the writer of Ecclesiastes, the preacher, won't let us do that. He says, these things, these times, God will, in his time, make them beautiful. When and how is unknown to us. The result of this, we don't know. But here's what we do know. God is the God of the messes of life. And he is walking in the mess of your life right now. And it may not be beautiful. It may be a complete wreck for you. Everything may be falling apart for you. But friends, we have to believe that there are good and beautiful things to come out of this. Now, much of how we experience this is within the unknown, right? Like, I don't know, and none of us know what the beautiful thing looks like at the very end. And this is sometimes how we experience life with God, isn't it? If I look at my family's life, and my children are sometimes very frustrated with me and my wife because we have the bigger picture. And so sometimes we make decisions about what we're going to do, what we're going to do. I don't know what that was. That did not sound good. So, they're going to check on whatever, something just fell apart in the building here. My wife and I have the bigger picture of life. And it's things that we experience and we know, but they often don't have those things. And so we make decisions. We have to balance how we're supposed to get food, how we got to get places to certain things. And sometimes it means we say no to certain things, we say yes to certain things. We're balancing all of these different things. And sometimes we can't explain it to them, right? We just make decisions, and they don't have the big picture in mind. And that can be very frustrating, isn't it? Friends, as older people, as adults, this is how we experience God as our Heavenly Father. He makes decisions. He does things. And he doesn't always explain to us why. But he's got the bigger picture. And he doesn't always need to explain it to us. That's how we interact with God. And so sometimes it can be frustrating. So this is why believing that God has the bigger picture in mind, that in his time, whatever these things are that we're experiencing, these seasons, will produce beauty. He's got the bigger picture for us. Here's what we do know. In these different times of change, God does not abandon his people. He does not abandon us. The brokenness and the pain of this world, he is working, he is refining, he is saving. Life is messy, but God has, in his big picture, a plan that he is executing even in this. This is also the reason, if we're going to back up and say, how do we know that God does not abandon us in times like this? This is the reason that explains why God sent his son. Because even in our mess of life, and these things we experience, God sent his son to make beautiful out of something that looked like it was very broken and very messy, our lives. And so this explains how he's not going to abandon us, because he continued to send and love, and he sent Jesus for us. And so as his children, we can say, help me with my unbelief. I believe, but help me in my unbelief. The fourth thing is this. Looking down at verses 11 to 15. In adversity, we navigate adversity by placing hope in eternity. We place our hope in eternity. So look at verses 11 down to 15, the second half of 11. He says this very famous verse. He says, also he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. And then down in verse 14, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken away from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. The way that you and I can navigate through adversity is by placing our hope in eternity. And it rhymes, but it's actually helpful for us to understand something about when we're going through adversity. Where is our navigation point? Is it in the temporary, or is it in something greater? He says there, he's put eternity into man's heart. But then he goes on. We love that verse. But he says, yet, so that he cannot find out what God has done. It's interesting, right? Because what it's simply saying is that there's a desire for eternity, but we can actually never find out why God does what he does. And so our hope can't be in having the answers. Our hope is not in having it all figured out. Our hope is in eternity, not in the temporary. Some of you may like orienteering. Anyone done orienteering? Now, orienteering is simply when you're given a map and a compass, and you're supposed to travel through some sort of diverse or unfamiliar territory, right? This was, something that people do in the mountains or even just around town. Say, give me a compass, give me a map, and I'll find where I'm going. Life on this earth is much like orienteering. We don't know exactly where the end point is, or where it's going, or how we will get around the corner, but we have a reference point. And the reference point is eternity. What God has done, he says, endures forever. And so the temporary can go away. And our hope is not in the temporary. Our hope is having this confident assurance that God will fulfill his promises. It's based in his character. It's based in his word to us. And so our navigation point through adversity, through struggle, is to say, God has a plan, and what he does and what he's going to do will endure forever. That is our navigation point. So as we look at this, we say, okay, there's this great poem, these great points for adversity and how we work it through. We say we want to accept it as an instructor, we want to reflect, we want to believe, we want to navigate. Jesus reminds us of this, that in this world, you will have trouble. But then he says this, take heart, I've overcome them. So we don't have to have it figured out. We simply need to trust the one who does. Let me pray for us, and then Corey and Hannah will come up and lead us in a few more songs. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, we thank you so much that your word speaks to the very nitty-gritty of our lives. We thank you for the book of Ecclesiastes and the wisdom and direction that it gives to us. And I pray that we would take the message to heart, that in the midst of all the different changes we're experiencing in life, that we can trust you. That we don't have to have it all figured out, but we can trust you as the one who does. In Jesus' name, amen.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above you, heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. 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 God, we praise you. God, we praise you. Praise God for all that He has done. Praise Him for He has overcome. The grave is beaten, love has won. Praise God, our Savior, Christ the Son. God, we praise you. God, we praise you. We sing amen. God, we praise you. God, we praise you. Sing, praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above you, heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Father, would you just give us eyes to see you during this time? I pray that our faith would be bigger than our fears, and our hope in your word and the time that we spend in your word would be greater and more powerful than the articles and news that we see online or on TV. Would your word just be our foundation? We need you. This is a time where, you're maybe shouting to us. You want us to hear you and to see you in ways that maybe we haven't before. So we want to praise you in the midst of
craziness in the midst of COVID-19, and trust that you're bigger than this, that you're for us and you set eternity in our hearts, that we might, in times like these, really ask what it is that you're about, what you're doing, and what we're here for. So help us to see with your eyes.
I believe in the sun. I believe in the risen one. I believe I overcome by the power of His blood. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my soul join the one that never ends because He lives. I was dead in the grave. I was covered in sin and shame. I heard mercy call my name. You rolled the stone away. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my soul join the one that never ends. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, every fear is gone. And I know He holds my life, my future in His hands. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my soul join the one that never ends. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my soul join the one that never ends. Because He lives. Because He lives.
Let's just sing that bridge again. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, every fear is gone, and I know that He holds my life, my future in His hands. Let's sing that together. Declare that.
Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, every fear is gone. I know He holds my life and my future in His hands.
Amen. Amen.
It's been so good to have you join us today. We're so glad that you can join us here online. Please remember to fill out the connection form right below us. Let us know you joined us today. If there's anything we can pray for you, we'd love to spend time on the phone with you, reaching out and just saying, how can we come alongside you in this time? We love you, church. We can't wait to see you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.